Hey, everybody out there, all you Star Vista Live cruisers and other folks tuning in. Welcome to another edition of All Access Pass from Home. I am your virtual cruise host, Jason, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. I'm sitting down with another absolute legend, Mr. Gary Puckett of Gary Puckett in the Union Gap. Gary, how are you, sir?
I am well. Thank you very much. How are you today?
Fantastic. Thank you. All things considered, we're obviously I think all going a little stir crazy, whether we like it or not, but doing our best. You were just mentioning a moment ago off camera that you got a full house. Tell us what's going on around your spot right now.
Well, our oldest daughter, is a doctor.
Wonderful.
So thank you. She's finishing up her residency and has been working at the hospital 15 hours a day. So, like you see on the news, she's in amongst those hardworking, exhausted folks, So she has 3 children, 6, 3, and 8 months. And we love the children with all of our hearts, but they are here 24/7, and it's a lot more than we can really almost handle at this age. But we're having a lot of fun. I said to my brother the other day, it's not only adorable, it's horrible.
I
so
bet
we're
you
having
were,
a good time.
I bet you all those years where you were a rock star, you weren't thinking that at some point you'd have to be rock star granddad. You'd have to be grandpa the rock star.
The wonderful part of it, or one of the wonderful parts, is that the kids love the music.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
Every time we get in the car, particularly, they always want to hear my records, and they sing along and they love the songs. So I'm getting a bigger dose of my own music now than I did in those days.
And I hope you can revel in it the same way, though. I hope you can accept that fandom of it. That's great. What do if you don't mind me dipping into your personal life, what do your grandkids call you?
They call me Doodle.
Doodle. I've asked you that before. I was hoping you'd say it. Doodle. Tell us why they call you Doodle, because I think that's one of the best I've ever heard.
Well, when I was their age and growing up and my speech was forming, my grandfather's name was Linville, and I was not able to say Linville. So everybody in my family then, which was my parents and my dad's sister, they all said, "What is he saying? It's not Linville. It sounds like Doodle." So he became Doodle until he was 89 years old. So when our first grandchild was born, Brandon, my wife said, I'm going to have the kids call me Yaya, because she always liked that Greek grandmother name, and I'm thinking to myself, and they said, "You are Doodle." And I said, "What?"
You've taken the mantle.
I have. So it reminds me of my grandfather almost on a daily basis.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yaya and Doodle. And now you're full-time Yaya and Doodle.
That's correct. Absolutely full-time.
You probably haven't been this much Doodle in a long time, Gary.
I'm telling you. Yeah, but it's a lot of fun. And, we do the studies every day. He's all set up online. He's only in kindergarten, but I tell you, he's smarter about it than I am.
It's impressive.
And there's a lot of places they have to go, and I'm really pretty amazed at the way they teach these children, to speak, to read, and he's not even in first grade, and he's reading pretty doggone well, and he's writing pretty well, and it's fun because they put a lot of games in there. So we see a lot of progress coming for him.
That's cool. Well, congratulations, and thank you for doing all that you do. And I offer this to you as the father of someone on the front lines. I mean, I think now more than ever, we can appreciate all the doctors, the nurses, the caregivers out there that are, this is a beast we're facing on every day. And I tell you what, huge thank yous to your daughter, if she gets a chance to watch this, and all of her colleagues, but also to you as well for raising such a wonderful and dedicated human.
Thank you very much. That's much appreciated. We, of course, watch the news every day, and we see the exhaustion out there, from everybody, stressed and working hard and long hours. So we're appreciative of what she does as well. So we just have to believe that she's smart enough to stay protected, so.
You would hope the doctors would know best in this. So, well, I think we could slip down that path pretty easily. Let's divert back into the
Sure.
fun stuff a little bit. So obviously it's the early 60s around the time, or I should say the 60s around the time when you guys just had monster, not 1960, but the 60s, when you guys just had, you being Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, or the Union Gap, just had monster years. But let's go back a little bit before that. What makes a young Gary think that he wants to get into music?
Well, it probably goes so far back because both my parents were really wonderful musicians and great singers, both of them. My mother was a very accomplished pianist. She played for functions and she taught and she played in church, and we had a piano at home and she was always playing. There was always music. My dad was a sax player, and that's how they met, actually, right out of high school. Out of the high school band, they went into a big band called the Dick Halverson Big Band.
Dick Halverson Big Band.
Yes, absolutely. We actually have a picture somewhere in our files of them in the big band, and they were a handsome young couple and enjoying music. But in those days, tour buses were very drafty and cold and not comfortable, so they opted for a more normal, traditional lifestyle. And my dad did well in life, though he worked very hard. And we had 5 kids in the family, but there was always music there. So I was always being gently forced in that direction, though I didn't know. Nudged. Yeah. I was put at the piano when I was 6 or 7 and said, "You'll take piano lessons." And I was like any 6 or 7-year-old, I'd rather go out and chase garter snakes, and jump in the mud and stuff like that, But I started by playing some piano. I'm not a great pianist or anything, but later on I found a guitar in my grandparents' attic. It was an old Spanish acoustic guitar, and it had 5 strings on it. But at that point in my life, I was listening to records like Honky Tonk by Bill Doggett. And of course, Elvis was there, and Little Richard and Fats Domino, and all the others, from the Everly Brothers to the Fendermen, to Coasters and Platters and all the groups, through the 50s. And
all those great 50s acts,
And I love the music of the 50s. I find myself often listening to the 50s on 5, just because it's the music I grew up with. And I'm a huge fan of Elvis early. I loved everything from Train I Ride to Heartbreak Hotel and onward. But that music to me was really inspirational. Of course, it was a time when, the adults were burning people's records and saying this is the devil's music and all that. And I don't know, youth has its expression, and we all expressed, so, but that's where it goes back to. And as I grew, my dad was in barbershop quartets, so he would bring his quartets to the house, and they would sing, and they were good. I mean, they would go and be in these contests, to see who could get the prize for the best applause or whatever. And I was always just amazed at the harmonies and things like that. And my mother sometimes would even play piano for them, so
that's great.
It was just music constantly. And that's what eventually, I think, brought me to the point of not only loving the music that was on the radio and growing with it and being a part of it, and being a teenager and all that. Eventually, though my family wanted me to go on into higher education, and I tried to please them, I really did. I went to college for 2 years, and I was
San Diego,
thinking,
right?
San Diego, yes. Yeah. We weren't a poor family. We weren't a rich family. So we couldn't afford, the state colleges and things, but I went to City College for a couple of years. And my idea was that I'd go on into some kind of medicine. And at the time it was some sort of forensics, psychology, that sort of thing, criminal psychology, child psychology. As it turned out, I was working in the the teen clubs and things, playing music, and I was being drawn away from school. And eventually I just kind of tossed my books and said, I'm going to give this a shot. So I went to work in a place called Foreign Auto Supply, which had basic engine parts for foreign cars in America. Now, this is not 1962 or something like that, three. And I was working days for this auto parts place, and I was working nights in nightclubs and things, so it was a little tiresome and all that kind of stuff. But I just found myself more drawn to the guitar. I wanted to sing, I wanted to play. It was more fun than working in an auto parts store,
Fair
So,
enough.
yeah. And eventually I said to the guys, I'm going to go give this a shot. I am going to go into the nightclubs full time. And then from there, wherever it takes me, they said, come back if you want your job back. So I could have gone on and had a career in auto parts.
In auto parts, who knew?
In auto.
Who knows what you could have done with your life if you wouldn't have been a rabble-rouser musician?
That's true. I could have been worthwhile somehow. At any rate, that's kind of the long story about it all. And I eventually quit the auto parts and, worked at nights. And I kept trying to think to myself, how can I, well, for a few years, I worked in the nightclubs, and it was fun playing the drifters and the coasters and the, all the music of the day. We played the Beatles and the Stones and all the rock and roll of the time, and even reached back into the 50s. We were a good trio, and I sort of cut my musical teeth, so to speak, there in a group called the Outcasts.
The Outcasts.
And a club called the Quad Room. So anyhow, you talk. I'm getting
Trust me, no one is watching this to hear me talk, sir. Okay, so you have the early 60s, you're in the Outcasts, and then it's what, Gary and the Remarkables? Is that correct? Is that what comes?
Yeah, that's what I called the band for a while. It was a working title. I didn't have any idea what to call it, after a group called the Outcasts, which was really a good band. But finally, it broke up. It was just one of those groups that was too volatile to continue. And so I said, fellas, I'll see you later. It's been fun. And
well, the name alone suggests that. I mean, you were not destined to stay together forever by becoming the Outcasts. Yeah.
Well, it was sort of I guess so. It was a put together band by a club owner that was a smart man, businessman in San Diego, and he found Bobby Brown, myself working in a band, and he said, you guys are going to go good with a drummer I found by the name of Tommy Kendall. And he put us together, and he said, I'm going to pay you good money. You're going to work in my club. And we did for 2 years, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. But then finally we split over tension and stress and all that kind of stuff, Sure. I looked around San Diego. It took me about 4 months really to find everybody that I thought could really be together, would want to be together, would want to stay together, would want to work together. I didn't know how to be a boss. I didn't even really want to be a boss, but as it were, I said, let's go see if we can get out of nightclubs, but we're going to have to go back into nightclubs and make a living to begin, which we did. And I found out that there were hundreds of records going out every month, to the radio stations. And I thought, how in the world does somebody get a shot at it other than having the record company believe in you so much that they're going to break you out, And so that's when I came up with the idea of the Union Soldier outfits and the name Union Gap to, hopefully break us out of that.
And in Union Gap, is it? We've had this discussion, but it's after Union Gap, Washington, correct? Or at least it's kind of around. That's where you got the concept.
Well, it's exactly Union Gap, Washington. I grew up in the Yakima Valley, and my idea, of course, was to wear Union Soldier outfits.
That'll get you noticed.
Yeah, Union Soldier, Union Gap. It just was automatic. I said, hey, we got the look, we got the name. And of course, we got a lot of flack about it in the beginning. But you know what? Even when we went into the nightclubs in our Union Soldier outfits, at first it was kind of a snicker and a laugh. But then people realized how cool it looked on stage, because we were like that blackboard where you drew things that made sense, that was flowing across that blackboard, and everybody said, wow, that's really cool. So eventually it just sort of caught on.
And all of this is still early 60s, correct? Early mid 60s?
Yeah, it was actually then by about 66, 67 into middle of 66 is when I started putting the group together. And it was 1967 January that I started rehearsing the band in my garage. So we were a garage band to begin with.
The original garage band. And you guys
Yeah.
exploded. I mean, 68 was as big a year as a band can have, really.
Well, we did very well. I was fortunate. I believe, excuse me, I had talent. I had a good group. I had a good look. I had a good name. I put together a portfolio. I treated it like a business, put pictures in the portfolio of us in our Union Soldier outfits. I put a demo in the portfolio that was me singing with the prior group that I was in. One of the songs was My Prayer by the Plouters. And I put lyrics that I had written in the package, and I went to all the record companies in Los Angeles and eventually came across a guy by the name of Jerry Fuller, who had produced a record and written a song. I should say written a song and then produced a record. It was called Travelin Man, and it was Ricky Nelson that recorded it. Actually, Jerry had written it for Sam Cooke.
Oh, wow.
But Sam Cooke was on his own track and didn't want the song. I don't know if he didn't like it or what, but Jerry's, or rather Ricky's people heard it and took it to Ricky, and he said, this is great. So they recorded it. It sold 4 million copies, and Jerry was off and running as a producer and a singer and a songwriter and all that kind of stuff. So
you had some wonderful success together in that era, in that phase as well.
Well, we did. He had a song called Woman, Woman, Have You Got Cheating on Your Mind? So he looked at my portfolio and he said, I like this. I like the outfits. I like your voice. He said, where can I hear this band? So I took the what is it I want to say? He took the opportunity to come and see us in San Diego. Showed up the night before he said he was going to be there, and I was kind of cruising through the night because when you work 6 nights a week, 9 to 2, it's a load.
You can't be at a 10 all the time. Yeah.
No, I'll tell you, I let the guys do a lot of singing that night. At midnight, he walked up to the stage and said, "Hey," and I looked at him and almost didn't recognize him. And he said, "Let's go make a record." So I went, whoa, here we go. Something's happening,
That's cool. And he was, you guys really were the right match, Union Gap and Fuller at the time. I mean, you guys had, is it 6 consecutive golds? 7 consecutive?
Yeah, 6 consecutive golds into 69, actually. So there was Woman, Woman. Young Girl, right on the heels of Woman, Woman, sold well over 2 million copies initially, about 2.5 to 3. And then Lady Willpower followed on its heels because Jerry was a great songwriter. He knew how to make a singable, fun, song. So
what people wanted to hear.
Exactly true. And late in 68, we had Over You. Then earlier in 69, we had Don't Give In to Him. Then there was This Girl Is a Woman Now. There were a few others. Let's Give Adam and Eve Another Chance, which was not quite so high on the charts, but has turned out actually to be one of my favorites. I just think it's kind of a cool song. As well as we had recorded Keep the Customer Satisfied, which was a Paul Simon song.
Mm-hmm. And as you're in this pocket, so to speak, as you guys are hitting on all cylinders, you're having monster successes with all of these gold records. Does it register? And you're so young at the time. Does it register what you're doing? Is this a career, or is this still something in your mind that's like, we'll do this for a while, we'll still go to the nightclub? I mean, what's your mindset during all this?
You know what? That's a terribly hard question to answer. Maybe had you asked me that 50 years ago when we were actually doing this,
Yeah.
I might have had a reasonable answer. But all these years later, in retrospect, I think I kind of lost my mind for a little while. Success can what is it I want to say exactly? It's hard. It can kind of warp your
Yeah.
mind a little bit. It
Yeah.
can take you off in a direction that really isn't you. And I think I got a little bit full of myself for a period of time until somebody brought me back to ground. And I said, yeah, I understand how it should be, So
Do you
I
remember
think,
that moment out of curiosity? You don't have to
well,
share it. You don't have to share it. I'm just saying, do you remember the moment or who it was that actually kind of?
I remember where it was. It was in a music store, and I can't remember the name of it. One of the famous ones in New York City, and I was with our road manager, who he was one of our roadies actually. His name was Peter Gray, and Peter was always my shadow. He was always following me around and helping me with this and that. And he was our driver, and he would load and unload, and all the stuff that road people do. And he and I had gone into the store, and I remember being dressed in a really nice double-breasted suit, and I guess I thought I was a dandy or something. I don't know. But as I'm trying out guitars, somebody in the store said, "Who does he think he is?" And I heard them say it, and I went, okay. And that started the thought process,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
But it takes someone that's fairly enlightened in the moment to be able to hear it, right? I mean, you can hear that one of two ways. You can hear it and bring it inside and internalize it and ask yourself that very same question, or you can disregard that person and I know exactly who I am. This is, you can really take one of two paths there, and good for you for being able to
Well,
recognize
yeah, thank you. I'm not sure that I really recognized it, but I think it started that process of me thinking
that.
and
Sure.
recognizing. I wouldn't give myself that amount of wisdom, to be honest with you then.
Well,
Maybe now, maybe now.
that begs the question. If you could go back to 1968, 9, 70, as you now, what would you tell you then if you could?
Don't lose your mind. Keep your
Stay balanced.
humility. Stay on path. Stay on track. Don't get dragged into the world of. I don't want to say evil. That sounds a little too
Yeah,
religious, but you know what I mean.
I
Don't
do.
don't get
Yeah.
dragged away. Fortunately, I didn't really get dragged away heavily in drugs and things like that. I'll admit I smoked my share of marijuana. It to me was fun. I enjoyed marijuana to play tennis, to swim, to run, to ski, to eat, to see movies. So, and today I would say to young people, don't do it. It burns your brain cells. If I'd have known that, I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have done it. But I did enjoy it, and I did it far too much. But there was a point when I started on a very healthy path, and I think I'm pretty lucky today to be 77 and still looking okay and sounding pretty good.
I was actually going to ask you as you were kind of taking us down that path. I was going to ask you, at 77 now, you still have a fairly robust, well, not at the moment, obviously, but a fairly robust touring schedule. You still perform live. Does it tax you as bad as it used to? I mean, is it worse? Is it better? Because you're in great shape. You sound fantastic. I wouldn't be able to tell if it does. I'm curious what the physical response is to doing a full show now.
Well, thank you for the compliment, by the way. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Doing a full show can be much more taxing than, for instance, doing the Happy Together tour, which I have done on half a dozen occasions, and I'm sure that I'll be back again. But because the show is short, I'm able to stay at full capacity all the time. When I'm doing 90 minutes a night, you
Yeah.
do that 3 or 4 nights in a row. If you aren't in perfect vocal health and perfect vocal shape, you can tax it to the point of needing a rest. On the Happy Together tour, it's night after night after night. But once again, I'm singing 20 minutes,
You're doing
full
short
bore.
shots. Yeah.
But then I can, step back. But fortunately for me, years ago, I realized that I needed to be on a healthier path than I was. And you know what it was that brought me to that point? I noticed one day in about 1972 or 3, maybe 4, where the price of meat doubled. And I said, that's just wrong. You can't do that to people. And I stopped eating meat.
Oh, interesting.
And I went on sort of a vegetarian path. I only weighed 138 pounds at 6 feet tall, and I ended up losing 10 pounds. Now, imagine
if you turned sideways, I'd lose you at that point. Like
I used to say, I have to run around in the shower to get wet. You know what I mean? But it started me thinking about health, thinking about good health. And at that point in my life, I started drinking a gallon of water because I read about water and I read about what's in water and things. And so throughout my life from about 1974, I'd say, I've been drinking a gallon of water every day. And at this point, I would have to say to anybody, I believe it's one of the true keys to perfect health, because it really keeps your body running right. You know, the other thing is to stop eating all the things that really are bad for you. And for a while, I didn't touch salt or pepper, sugar, any of the chemicals and all that stuff. So, I went off the rails toward the health. And then
I was going to say, you really went down the path.
I did. But now we're moderate. My wife is a great cook, and I still now like to have a good filet. I still like to have a good glass of wine, and we are moderates, and we go down that path.
My grandmother calls wine her medicine. So she's like, oh, I have to have my medicine. I'm like, okay. I won't argue with that.
And my wife says one more glass for medicinal purposes.
Exactly. Same thing. Yeah. It's for heart health, honey. It's for heart health. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing. Water, water leads to a ton of things, as you know, intimately, obviously, but water also has some qualities to it that people don't realize. For instance, I know this for a fact: if you're thirsty, 9 times out of 10, you'll misinterpret that as hungry. And so often, if you're not getting enough water, you'll eat more because you think you're satiating, your hunger, when in reality, your body's craving water. And it's unbelievable how many qualities there are to drinking more water and what it can do for you specifically.
Absolutely.
True. Especially keeping your voice.
Oh, yeah. And I'm very lucky to live in a part of the world that, we have. So it's very helpful.
We lost you for a second there. No, we lost you. Repeat that. You're lucky to live in a part of the world that has what?
High humidity.
Yes.
A good portion of the year. Yeah. We're in Clearwater, Florida. So he works well with desert's hard on me. It's just hard on your skin. It's hard on your vocal cords. For some reason, I'm getting hiccups. I don't know why.
I have that effect on people. So tell us a little bit about the tour, the Happy Together tour.
Well, it's just one of those things that was put together years ago by a fellow by the name of David Fishoff, and a guy that worked for him by the name of Howard Silverman. And Howie came to a concert that we did at, what was the name of the arena? It was on Long Island. I can't remember the name of the arena for some reason, but it was one of those 20,000 seaters, where there were multiple groups. And after the show, Howie came to me and said, my boss would probably like to meet you. And I said, okay, who's your boss? And he said, well, he's this guy, and we're in New York City. So we went and met, and he says, I'm working with the Turtles and the association. I'd like to work with you. And I said, oh, okay. So we started working together. And at some point, they might dispute this, but at some point I said to David and Howie, you should put the three of us out on tour together. I think that we all have a certain audience, and we would bring that audience together to have a great concert. And they called up one time and they said, we're going to put out a tour with the Turtles, the Association, Gary Puckett, and the Union Gap, and Spanky and our gang, and we're going to call it Happy Together. This was 1984.
Oh, wow.
So it was the very first classic oldies tour to go out. And nobody knew how to do it. So we all were kind of responsible for getting ourselves to the venues, but we worked 8 months that year. And it was phenomenally successful. So 85, they put out another Happy Together tour. And I can't remember the exact lineup, but it was, of course, the Turtles, I think the Byrds, I think Gary Lewis, and I think maybe Mark Lindsay from Paul Revere and the Raiders. And then in 1986, the Happy Together tour became the Monkees 20-year reunion tour, which I was invited on. And I was a part of the opening act, which was Herman's Hermits, the Grassroots, and Gary Puckett of the Union Gap. And then, of course, there was a intermission and the Monkees closed the show. And it was phenomenally successful throughout 86. We played in all the arenas and stadiums, and it was fantastic.
And it's been going strong for quite a few years now. How often do you do it still?
Well, they started, I think it's now 11 or 12 years ago, doing the Happy Together tour again. And they sort of change it up every year, but I've been on it now, I think 5 times. I think I was on it in 12 and 13, in maybe 16, and then 18 and 19. Those are the 5 years I was on it. At any rate, it's been great fun, and we have great crowds, and I'm happy that people still love the music.
What's it like reconnecting with all the guys and gals that, you performed with and alongside, the people you looked up to, the people that looked up to you, your peers? It's got to be pretty cool to get backstage and sit in the green room and reconnect.
It feels like we are old friends, and I'd say for the most part, we really are. There are not too many of them that I've really hung out with off the tour, so to speak. But, many of them I have become really good friends with through the years of working together. So it just feels great. It's always like old home week when we go back and do another Happy Together tour. The coronavirus is causing them to move a lot of the early dates in June and tack them on the end of the tour. But it's going to go out. It's going to be strong. It's going to be fantastic. And I think that they might just invite me for 2021.
That's one of the cool things about the Flower Power Cruise specifically that I see every time is it's cool to see acts that are still fans of each other. You're fans of each other personally and professionally, and that's unique, and it's nice.
It's wonderful. I'm a fan just like everybody else. I'm the fans that come to the show. I'm a fan just like they are. So for me to go on a Happy Together tour with a Gary Lewis or a Mark Lindsay or a Chuck Negron, or an Association or whoever it may be, the Cowsills, I am a fan of that music. So it pleases me to be there and keep it alive.
Well, and then you got people like your grandkids that are still there keeping your music alive. So there's no concerns. We got generations.
We do. There's no doubt about it.
Well, you mentioned COVID-19. You mentioned the whole coronavirus thing we're going through here. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, as making sure that you, your family, everyone's happy, healthy, and safe where you are.
We are very well, I must say that we're happy. We could be a lot happier if it was over, and it will be soon, I'm sure.
I agree.
This is a very unusual thing in the history of the world, I would say. It has happened before. It might happen again, but we are healthy. We are happy that our little family is together and well, and we will succeed and we'll continue, and we will love our little family and continue to do whatever we can to keep them healthy and happy.
I can only imagine you're ready to get back on stage at some point here as well.
Well, it's under my skin. It's in my heart, and I don't know what I would do without it. I try to get in a little practice every day, work on my voice, play the guitar a bit, work on a new song. But I got to tell you, when you've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old that want to jump in, it's pretty difficult to get things done.
Harmonizing's a challenge with a kindergartner, I'm sure. But
yeah.
Well, it's great that they're so interested. Are you teaching them any instruments or any vocal lessons or anything?
Well, I'm waiting to see where it really ends up, or starts, I should say. That's a better word, because they both love music. And if I sit at the piano, they'll both stand there and listen for that minute or 2 or 3. And then they're kind of off, or they just start pounding on the keys. I've already bought my grandson a little baby Taylor, which is a great, great little guitar.
Yeah.
And he's just not quite ready for it. And it'll only be a couple more months, I'm sure. And I'm going to teach him how to play a few chords, and then we're going to start playing guitar together. And, we'll see where that goes, because the 3-year-old wants to sing Lady Willpower. So.
and Doodle shall abide.
Shall abide. I shall join in.
Well, Gary, I really appreciate you taking the time to stay here and use up a little bit of your day chatting with me and all of our friends and fans from the Star Vista Live cruising family. I know I speak on behalf of all of them when I say not only thank you, but also we're thankful that you are happy and healthy and have your whole family there at home. And I know everyone looks forward to seeing you again soon.
Well, I look forward to seeing all the fans, including you. And thank you for having me on. If you want to add to this in any way, you know how to find me. So please let me know.
We'll track you down. Something tell me you could use a couple minutes off of Doodle time.
All right. Stay safe.
Appreciate you, Gary. Hey, for everybody watching, thanks for tuning in. As always, I'm your virtual cruise host, Jason. And today I got to sit down with the fabulous Mr. Gary Puckett. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and keep an eye on this channel for more content soon. Be well, be safe, be smart, be healthy. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.